screen then. Okay, this I hope is very visible to you.
Yes, perfect. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks. So today I'm going to talk about the assessment of science, the assessment of scientists. And Thomas Boa, who is our DOAJ ambassador in Western Central Africa, will highlight the role that he thinks that African open access people and publishers can play there, scientists as well, of course, the African perspective. So I will highlight more of the things coming from the Northern Hemisphere, the West, but not only, as you will see. So my first slide, I would like to say that the assessment system that we know and that we have is intimately connected to the Western publishing system. You know, the impact factor, all kinds of ratings, age index, and rankings. And this Western publishing system and the rankings are controlled by shareholder companies, are firmly rooted in a capitalist system. We think that the assessment system that is there has to change. This publishing system has to change, and the scholarly communication needs to be controlled by the scholars and not by big companies. Those are the main things, the fundamental points for my talk. First, let me talk about research excellence. Research excellence, it says here, is a neo-colonial agenda. And what do we think about that? Well, if you think about science and you live in Asia or in Africa, you think about the science quality that we have in the West, the ideas in the West, in the northern countries. And there is just an emphasis on the big journals, the very famous journals, the famous institutes, the famous universities. And you think automatically that everything from other parts of the world is a lower quality. This means there is a real chance, or there is a real array of a neo-colonial agenda where Western Northern science just dominates the world and keeps doing it if you don't know anything about it. An overemphasis on the non-local connections is damaging to the research systems, because research is not something just done in the Northern or the Western countries. Research and knowledge gathering is done all over the world. But the other parts of the world are just marginalized because of this idea of research excellence. And what is the fuel for the research excellence idea? Well, that is metrics. Metrics, measuring citation indexes, how many citations are there, how many papers did you publish. And the metrics, you have to know, like the impact factor, are just to a large extent used by the publishers to market their journals. Because you know that the high index journals are always in the league of the big publishers. And so it just promotes people publishing there and the profits for the shareholders of those big publishers. The metrics consist of citation score, impact factor, ranking, number of publications, other stuff that has been devised, all based on measuring things that are not really the only thing that science is made of. An important factor in the assessment is also English as the language of science. Why couldn't you just communicate your science in your own language, where your people can understand it better and you can express yourself better in what you want to say? This is especially necessary in the human sciences, for example. Why should all the human sciences that address social issues just be expressed in English? This puts non-native English speakers at a disadvantage. And sometimes, or often, papers are just rejected because the English is not good enough, not looking at the science quality, but the language. So this is an important point. And I think it would be very useful for any of you, if you have the time, to listen to this debate here that is available on YouTube. It was a webinar on decolonizing the global publishing industry. And especially important, I think, is the minutes 47, 48, where Florence Piron, who died a few years ago, did a lot of explanation on how open access even can be a colonizing thing. And Thomas Mboa, who has been a student of hers, he can really explain it very well. He has just talked about these ideas very widely, even in the UN. So what else about quality assessment? The quality assessment, I think, needs to be contextualized. So it shouldn't be the same in the northern or the western countries as in other parts of the world. And that is also because we don't have one knowledge. There is a lot of knowledges in the world, but as I said, many of those are marginalized. And if you are going to measure the quality of knowledges that are disregarded in the northern countries, then it will always be a lower quality. But it shouldn't be like that. There should be much more interest in cross-linking all the knowledges of the world and let all the scientists give their ideas on what knowledge really is. In a sense, I would say, there is so much knowledge, but there is so much knowledge that isn't wisdom. And this is another person I want to cite myself, Anders Inset, who is a philosopher from Norway, and he is really explaining that knowledge keeps going on, but for a large part, it's also knowledge that you don't have any use for. And what is wisdom? And I think there is a lot of hidden wisdom in the knowledges that are disregarded to date, which are, for example, from African communities, from Asian communities. So what is important? What factors influence the research assessment process and should influence it? The cultural differences. How do you regard knowledge as important? Languages. If you express your ideas in your own language, you can do it better. So that means that the quality of your communication becomes better. The topics, I would say, if you are living in Africa, why should you just publish on topics that are more important in the United States, only to be published in a journal from the United States? That shouldn't be the case. The global distribution of journals, there is not enough journals in their own languages in the countries that are marginalized, the periphery. The educational resources, the students have to know what is happening and why it's happening, and also the teachers, and they can make a change. And of course, there is the thing that women scientists are always also, most of the time, especially put at a lower position. So what has been done about this? Get rid of the impact factor, the science metric systems. There has been the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment quite a few years back, and many parties, universities, mostly in northern countries, but also from other parts of the world, have signed the declaration. There is a need to improve the ways in which scientific research is evaluated, and not just by metrics. And perhaps it shouldn't be assessed by metrics based on citations at all. There have been many papers by this group, and there have been many developments on how to assess research in the right way. I think it goes too far. I don't want to read all the things that have been done. the essence is that people are thinking about other kinds of evaluation. And the most recent linked event was the Open Science European Conference in 2022 in March. The aim for research to be evaluated based on its intrinsic merits rather than on the number of publications or the citations, etc., etc. It was a very interesting conference, and it resulted in the Paris Call on Research Assessment, where they said rewards quality and the various impacts of research should be having in the system. You have to ensure that research meets the highest standards, of course, but you have to value the diversity of research from different parts of the world, from different disciplines. You also have to use the assessment criteria that are for different disciplines different, and also from different cultures. And you should not only reward the research outputs, but for example, how do you do your research? Do you do open science? It is not often very much valued at the time. The good practices, in particularly open practices for sharing the research results. And also teaching is a good teacher. A university should have good teachers and also assess that quality of science. Value the collaborative work and the cross-disciplinarity and the citizen science. So there is loads of ideas on how to go to another research assessment system. And you will see that is not yet there. The old system is very strong, but there is developments. I want to emphasize that one of the most periculous things in the research assessment or in assessment of quality in general is the ranking. Ranking is really overstated. So, for example, the university rankings like the ARWU and the QS and the World University Ranking. There you can find the top universities. And what do you see? All the top universities are in the northern countries. And one of these criteria to say it's a top university is how many Nobel Prize winners are at the university. So this is not a real good way to look at science and at universities as the institutes for science. The truth is that the top universities are mainly old, large, English-speaking, research-focused, and in the global north. So this is an interesting view that I completely share. And it is very good to read these arguments. So what about the view from Africa, also from Asia, from other parts of the world? I think that for the most, I've talked about the views from the West. And of course, I cannot talk about the views of Africa because I'm not African. But I realize that the evaluation systems are really firmly rooted in the Western thinking and the Western ways of doing. So Thomas will be better placed to talk about it. But for the moment, I just want to say that there is a real awareness in Africa that you have to change the system and that you have to reward the regional collaborations. For example, in Benin, where the training, production of research, the modern and the traditional methods all receive attention and also acknowledgements. And there was a DORA LibSense webinar very recently, where they say, how can research practices be transformed through open science as a way? And I think it must be the way that you can do it. And they said, well, why should research outputs be considered based on the intrinsic merit rather than these nice proxies like journal impact factor and H-index? Well, here we say, and especially the people who are the policymakers, like numbers. So the H index and all these kind of things are very nice because somebody who has 100 is better than somebody with 95. But we think it's a false metric. You really have to go to other ways of thinking. And we hope that African scientists will impose their way of thinking on how to assess the quality of knowledge gathering. So we think no ranking if you want to throw forward. The quality criteria should include more than just citations, and perhaps even it should not include any citation metrics at all. The ranking, if you continue to use it, they promote inequity and they maintain the dominance of the big publishers, as I have said in my previous slides. The ranking also drives publish and perish culture, and it frustrates many early career scientists. Everybody wants to publish in one journal that is particularly important in their view. And if you can't, then you go to the next one, and finally you end up with your research after many rejections and many years in a journal that you didn't want to end up with. But your research is essentially lost, and your career is lost, and you just go out of the science. You lose so many good people by enforcing this ranking and this idea of you have to publish somewhere specific. You have to always realize that the ranking, the impact factor, and all the metrics are controlled by the commercial companies, and they have the most interest in just increasing their profits for the benefit of the shareholders, and not. They also have an interest in promoting science because that's their business, but their main interest is in money. The ranking should be replaced by a new set of criteria. And I think that scientists everywhere, in Africa, in Asia, and also other people, stakeholders, should just think about how it should look like. And one of the essential things is that it should be under community control and not under the control of commercial companies. So in this open science conference in Paris, there was somebody from the Netherlands who said, well, she is Kim Huypen of the Universities of the Netherlands. She said, in the Netherlands, there is already a change going on. Our ambition is that we aim for a healthy environment for the academic staff, and we want to value teaching, research, impact, patient care, leadership, everything, and not just the citations and how many articles you have published. So there is a whole framework now in the Netherlands from the Dutch universities that say want to adapt. But there is quite some resistance from the researchers who also cling to their impact factors and their papers in big journals. So it's not just, oh, we're going to do it and it's okay. There is quite some people trying to get not installed. So one of the things also is if you want to be a professor or you go and you want to have a job, then normally you would have a CV and you would write down all your publications in the big journals and everything. What now happens is that people in the Netherlands ask them to write some narrative on what they have done and only cite some important articles in your view that you have published, where you have been the main author and why you think that is important. And you are being judged by people in your discipline from the universities, not on the basis of the number of your articles and where you have published, but on the importance of your research and how you have done it. Another thing of this conference, and I keep coming back to this Paris conference, is there was a talk by Thomas Husser of Austria, who said that acknowledging the quality of works published in local languages is very important, because how can you judge the quality of a works of human science, arts of humanities, if it's from a country that is non-English speaking, if it has to be published in English. It should be published in the original language, in the language of that country, and then also be just assessed using that language and looking at how the scientific message has been formulated there. And he made a case for ending the use of the inappropriate metrics, referring, of course, also to the San Francisco Declaration. He also said that for the research communities, for all of us, it's very urgent and vital to consider how you want to be evaluated. You have to take your own action. And he pointed to open science as a way to go. So quality, I can't go and talk about quality without talking about peer review in some detail. Well, you all know peer review. So at the moment, there are so many forms of peer review. Single blind, double blind, open peer review, collaborative, cascading, post-publication peer review. Often, the peer review system is that you have peer reviewers, two experts who do a review. And then the editor of the journal says, okay, this is a good article. And the authors in many of the review systems do not really get an idea of what has been said about their paper. Also, the readers that read an article and the people at my organization, the Directive Open Access Journals, you cannot see the peer review reports except in specific forms of peer review, which would make clear how well the peer review was done. What I want to say is that peer review is often hidden behind a wall. So it can be as short as, I like this paper, go on and publish it, which is not a peer review. Or it can be extensive and 5 pages, or it can be just something telling that the person has a theory that collides with your theory, so you don't want it to be published. All these things kept in the dark is not a good way to do science reviewing. So the peer review system has to change, I'm afraid to say. And I want to refer to an article by the late John TENNANT, who said another kind of peer review is needed. And he gave an overview, a very interesting paper on the state of the art in peer review, in which he pointed out several key aspects. I think one of the things most important is open reports, so that people can read what kind of things have been reviewed, what the reviewers have said. And if the reviewers don't want their names in the review reports because their colleagues are offended when they reject their paper, then do the open reports with an anonymous peer review. But at least give the text of what has been peer reviewed, what were the comments and everything, so that everybody can see what has been done and how it has been judged. Open participation, open pre-review manuscripts, open commenting, open platforms, all these kind of things are underway. Peer review is changing, and hopefully for the better. Quite a few publishers, and I can only refer to PLOS and others, eLife, the big publishers, still big open access publishers from the North, they do experiment with peer review, and it's important. And now we come back to measuring impact of research and quality of research. It needs contextualization. And I come back to this webinar between LibSense and DORA, where the open science and research assessment in Africa was discussed by these people especially. It has also been a very interesting webinar and workshop. And the main conclusions here were that shifting the scholarly culture to value open sharing of software, data, protocols, and research findings requires a change in how researchers and their outputs are assessed. So you cannot implement just assessment systems that should be the same for all parts of the world and all disciplines. A one-size-fits-all approach is not good. The efforts must account for the context if they are to be successful. the region, the languages, the disciplines. So they had a very, very fruitful and interesting debate on how you should do research assessment in that workshop. And I can recommend you to go to the information here. So the current research assessment, again, leads to a publish and perish. So every one of the researchers feels the need to publish in a small number of journals that are highly ranked. And that produces bias in content, and it leaves many talented people behind, which is my sentence here. But I want to quote John TENNANT in a presentation he did for Delft, where he said, would you like to publish or perish? And he thinks the mantra, you know, all the term, the publish and perish, or perish. He said the mantra publish or perish is dead. You have to replace it by publish and perish, because there is underfunding, there is unhealthy competitiveness, and it's very difficult to climb the academic ladder. Just people give up, they are frustrated by the whole system because of the bad assessment methods. The publication pressure is also bad for science, not only for the people, because it gives rise to unreliable research data. You want to publish as quick as possible, even not very well checked. There is more plagiarized content. There is an over-reliance on peer review. You think they will do it. And I explained peer review is not the gold standard. There is a false sense of supremacy among the professors from the north who think they are the best, and they are the ones who know how to judge knowledge or wisdom. Then there is in general also the effect of marginalization of the non-Western knowledge, as I have tried to make clear here. So all these things have been directed to our own actions that we can take, the actions that we think also other people should take, especially the publishers. But it's just very simple to say the publishers are wrong and they do things wrong and the commercial things is wrong. We have to ask ourselves, why are we just adhering to the system? We, the scientists, the university councils, the ministers of higher education in various countries, the funders, everyone is just continuing doing what they always did. And then nothing is going to change, of course. And why? We have to ask ourselves, why are you doing this? And that is a personal question as well. So I think the way out of it would be to go for research assessment reform. And that also involves practicing open science. And the fundamental things for open science are that you have to share and not be afraid to lose things. You share and you gain. You evaluate using evaluations of open practices and open evaluations. And you collaborate as much as possible with others. Because why should you do all the same kind of research and trying to be the best in finding something instead of each one contributing to the big building and make a bigger building? Not trying to do all the same, collaboration is much better than competition. So the way forward, I think, is open science. And I quote John TENNANT again, open science is just science done right. And for the moment, much of the science we do is science done wrong. The open science methods need to be part of the curriculum at the universities. You cannot change if students don't know how to do open science. There has to be a curriculum on how to do it. And also there have to be changes in the assessment systems in the student phase where you are just studying and doing your studies, but also afterwards when you produce other kinds of works. Publishing should ideally also be done in community-controlled journals and platforms, which can also be university journals and association-related journals. And especially, I think here, you should consider publishing in a journal from your own country and reach as many people as you can that can benefit from your research, and give them also a platform, because if you do open science and open access, the whole world can also view your research. But don't aim for publishing in this English language high-ranked journals. And science finally should be assessed by the criteria independent from the publishing venues and languages, which I have been arguing all along. So how to proceed? We are not there yet, by far. The picture of what good science should look like is emerging, I hope. And it will involve the collaboration of many open infrastructure providers like Crossref, the DOAJ, and others that we even don't know. There is so many things and that are necessary to have a good open science system. But it will certainly involve a change of mind of all the scholars and all the publishers and the policymakers. We have to abandon a number of ideas on research excellence and where you should publish. And my final slide here is on a recent research published by Tony Ross Hellauer, where he says open science, that is really the way to go. But if you do it wrong, it will really increase the inequities. Because if open science is just done, especially by people from the northern wealthy countries, then these open science articles will also be published in the northern journals. And the dominance of the north will just be remaining. You can now already see that the authors of open access articles were more likely to be male, senior, and in the case of the United States, federally funded, working at prestigious universities. Worse, the citation advantages linked to the open access mean that those people publishing in the open access journals from the north get richer and more important and more influential all the time. So you have to take care of publishing, changing the publishing landscape and the assessment system, and being also not blind for the bad effects that some practices of open science may have if done wrong, and especially if you are going to follow the lead of continuing to do the ranking and continuing to take the importance of the impact sector as the highest growth. So thank you for listening, and this was my presentation then.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was excellent, and there are some comments and reflections in the Q&A and in the chat, and maybe I'll start with a Q&A here. There's a comment from Lakwikilu. I agree with Tom that so-called prestigious high-impact journals are in the Northern Hemisphere, and their interest is biased to issues related to their context and not that of other parts of the world. There is also a comment from Benjamin. This is indeed good to know that for most journals in developing countries, in these countries, many demand-driven research tend to be rejected by some very high impact journals, Nature, etc., because the content seems not to be innovative. What's not innovative might be precision science in a particular country. Most times technology transfer might not suffice because of different social demographic conditions. And then Hester is asking about your opinion please, on the exclusion element of article processing costs, many African scholars and researchers cannot afford the prices charged by open access journals.
Yeah. So the last question is something that is also addressed by Tony Ross-Hellower, who thinks that these high APC values of open access journals drive the inequity. But I think it's also part of the framework of thinking that we keep doing it. It's why is it putting African scientists at a disadvantage? Because you want to publish in an open access journal that charges high APCs. Why not choose an open access journal that doesn't charge APCs? There are very, very many journals that don't charge APCs. Open access journals in the north and in the southern part of the world. So these journals, called diamond journals, don't have the disadvantage of not being able to publish there. And you have to bear in mind that you should ask yourself, why do you want to publish in that journal with the high APC? Possibly because of the high rank of that journal, because of the prestigious name of the publisher, because of the council of the university, which requires from you that you publish in such a journal. And that is the whole thing. The system has to change. It should be very okay for you to publish in a journal that doesn't charge APCs, that doesn't have this prestigious name, but does a good job of publishing, and also is read widely by the persons who need your research. It is a change of mind for everyone, and also for the researchers who want to publish.
And that's exactly what Lipsens is trying to do with research assessment reform. You mentioned this joint webinar with DORA, and there was a presentation from Latin America, and Latin America has a continental forum on research assessment reform. And Lipsens is also setting up such a forum for Africa, and of course there will be collaboration with Latin America. And I think these are all encouraging developments. Let me read some comments from the chat as well, because I think they're important. Kirsten is saying that post-publication reviews have flourished during COVID-19. And then Hester is commenting, in my opinion, open peer review will be a problem in Africa. We have deeply ingrained in most of our cultures the respect for elders. This will affect my ability to objectively and critically contribute to the quality of an article. If I know it has been written, for example, my supervisor professor, by pointing out mistakes or make suggestions of how and where it could be done better. And
yeah,
then,
there is the issue of people always worrying if you, I mean, you are a scientist, even if you are a young scientist, you can think. And you can give your view on certain works, even if it's from elderly professors who have lots of merits behind them. Then they can make mistakes. And they can be kept sharp if their students keep looking at them critically. And it will just be good if those students don't have to put their name on the report if they do reviews, and the professors neither. If you have an anonymous reviewing system, but the content will be open, then you can see what is wrong with the paper without anybody being offended or being scared of the possible repercussions that you lose your job or something, or that you think, what is the student saying for my work, you know? Perhaps the anonymous thing is the most safe to address this issue.
And Kirsten is also writing, I suggest that storytelling or narrative writing in science should be a unique style of contribution in Africa. There is a lot of support for this style, contextualizing science. That's an interesting idea. There is a question from Mark, and maybe that's the last question we'll take, and then we'll switch to Thomas' presentation. So one of my researchers has had her work plagiarized in a predatory journal. The original article was published in an Elsevier journal, and the plagiarizing article was published 2 years later. Any redress advice on that?
Yeah, so the article was published in an Elsevier paper, and the plagiarized content was published in the predatory publisher journal afterwards. Yeah, I mean, it should be the action of Elsevier to be taken and to, I mean, they always say, if you publish with an Elsevier journal, they did, if you transfer your copyright, we want that because we can protect your rights. So if something like this happens, I think the author should ask Elsevier to represent them legally and take actions against that publisher or against that practice. It's the only thing. And if you are not, if you are your copyright holder, then the only thing is that you can make it, write a letter to that journal and say that you want that paper to be retracted because it plagiarizes your content. And you can publicize your letter that you sent to that paper, to that publisher. If they don't retract the paper, you can make it open that this journal refuses to withdraw the plagiarized paper, for example, which will damage their reputation if it's not already damaged as a predatory journal. But those are the two ways that I think you should go. Either you have your copyright, or the publisher, Elsevier in this case, has the copyright. And as a copyright owner, you should take appropriate action.
Thanks a lot. Just to sum up that we are in this transition state, and it's really up to every researcher, research administrator, journal editor, journal publisher to take some actions to make sure that quality is addressed in a way that is relevant to local context and issues, and also that research assessment is really an African research assessment reform, or maybe even, I don't know, national research assessment, or even institutional, and not copy and paste mistakes that were done in the northern hemisphere. And I guess with that, we'll thank Tom, and I think Tom will stay for the Q&A part in French as well, and we can probably switch to French and Thomas' presentation. And I will email today's slides and recording to everyone, and those who attended all the webinars will receive certificates of participation from DOAJ, and we'll be in touch with you about that in the coming days, a week. So thank you so much, and let me stop English recording, switch to French.